Can a simple rear suspension piece change the fate of a whole season? What Ferrari did in Mugello could be the most shocking turning point of the year in Formula One. But what is behind these secret tests? When Ferrari chose Mugello as the stage to test his new rear suspension, he did not do it for nostalgia or comfort. Mugello is not any circuit. It is a circuit owned by Ferrari, yes, but above all it is a brutal, demanding, ruthless trial terrain. With its mixture of high and medium speed curves, pronounced slopes and extreme technical demands, it is the perfect place to separate the theory of reality. If an improvement works in Mugello, it probably works anywhere in the calendar. The test session, officially framed as a commercial filming day, was actually one of the most delicate technical operations that Ferrari has carried out in recent years. They had only 200 kilometers authorized by regulations, which means less than 35 laps in total. Every kilometer had to count. Each meter traveled should show precise data. The objective was not to roll, but to validate whether the new suspension architecture could solve what simulations, wind tunnels and test benches had promised. And what was being evaluated was not a simple more component. It was a complete redefinition of the way in which the SF25 interacted with the asphalt. The traditional system had shown a critical vulnerability. The car lost aerodynamic efficacy when the management height rose. But if they lowered it too much, the flat background with the asphalt and caused sanctions as it had already been seen in China. The new suspension design was conceived to attack that dilemma. The engineers had reconfigured the anchor of the upper triangle of the rear suspension, modifying their connection with the gearbox to generate a greater anti-quad effect. This technical principle, based on avoiding the sinking of the car during acceleration, could allow pilots to maintain a more stable height without compromising traction. Not only that, a car that sinks less is a car that preserves its aerodynamic platform better, which translates into greater load, less tire wear and more sustained speed in curve. In practice, that means that Hamilton and Leclerc could drive with more confidence, attack curves without fear of losing grip or destroying the background of the car. That psychological stability for the pilot is as important as the physical improvement of the car. A pilot who trusts in his machine is able to extract 100%. A car that cheats, which changes its behavior in each lap, destroys the concentration return after. During those few hours in Mugello, Ferrari compiled an avalanche of data. Suspension telemetries, tire behavior, comparative between fuel loads, motor maps adapted to the new settings. And most importantly, sensations. Because the numbers can say a lot, but it is the pilot's comments that really dictate if a technical evolution has a future. The system that was developed in Maranello was not an improvised emergency solution. It was the result of weeks of computational modeling, validation in dynamic simulators, and above all, of a painful understanding of the mistakes made in the original conception of the car. It started from a premise. The SF25 had a competitive performance in ideal conditions, but that window was so narrow that, in practice, it was unusable in a calendar as varied as that of Formula One modern. The engineers began redesigning the upper triangle of the rear suspension, one of the most critical elements to define how the car transfers weight into accelerations and braking. The challenge was how to anchor this new arm without compromising the integrity of the gearbox, which also acts as a structural part of the chassis. Modern F1 cars' transmission is built in compound materials, extremely light, but also limited in terms of mechanical tolerance. Modifying your geometry or adding new loads requires a complete redesign of your housing and internal reinforcements. This means that Ferrari not only redesigned a suspension, he redesigned a good part of the mechanical heart of the car. But the real genius of change was not alone in the hardware. He was in the software, in the fine dynamic parameter adjustment that allow the car to adapt in real time to the track conditions. Ferrari integrated additional sensors in the suspension to monitor vertical loads, axis compression and weight distribution during accelerations. This information is now channeled directly to the chassis control system, which can adjust the behavior of the car in microseconds. In a car that suffered from extreme sensitivity, that level of control can be the difference between a winning return and an off-track lap. And then there is the logistics aspect. This type of innovation not only requires technical redesign, it requires approving new validation protocols with the FIA, undergoing inspections, and in some cases renegotiate minimum limits and security certifications. In Ferrari they moved with absolute secrecy, even within the team itself. Only a small group of engineers had full access to the project. It worked in parallel at night and using resources reserved for medium-term developments. It was an undercover surgical operation within an elite structure. The goal was simple but ambitious: expand the SF25 operational window. Make the car not depend on a perfect configuration that could perform well in different circuits with different levels of load and above all with different piloting styles. Because while Leclerc preferred a more aggressive car at curve entrance, Hamilton needed a more predictable rear train in traction. The new system had to satisfy both without compromising the aerodynamic base. The great unknown now is not only if this evolution will work in the most demanding circuits of the calendar. It is whether it can survive the extreme conditions of degradation, heat, and lateral load that are coming in paths such as Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, or Baku. Maranello has played his most powerful letter, and there is no turning back. What they built in secret could be their salvation, or the last great commitment of a team that is not willing to fail again. The tests in Mugello represented a turning point for Ferrari, but their true value does not lies only in the technical. What is at stake is much deeper. Because if this evolution is effective in real career conditions, not only will it alter the internal dynamics of the Scuderia, but also the balance of power in the 2025 championship. The big question is, can this corrected version of the SF25 make Ferrari a legitimate contender for the title? The answer, although still open, begins to lean towards yes. Not due to optimistic speculation, but for a combination of factors that begin to align. The first is the competitive context. McLaren, despite leading the championship with authority, has begun to show cracks in its operational structure. His mistakes of the past have not completely disappeared, and although the MCL39 is fast, its performance window remains dependent on very specific conditions. Red Bull, on the other hand, is going through its most turbulent stage in years, with a drastic change of pilots and internal tensions that could stop their technical development. And Mercedes, although solid, still drags chronic inconsistencies in high aerodynamic circuits. This leaves Ferrari in an unexpected position, an opportunity to trace from behind with a technical package that, if confirmed as competitive, can generate a domino effect. Because it is not the same to fight for points than to do it from the confidence that the car responds, that you can fight for podiums without depending on abandonments or atypical climatic conditions. That change of mentality within a team like Ferrari can accelerate everything, from factory evolution to race execution. But beyond the collective, there is the human factor. Charles Leclerc has demonstrated during the last seasons that he can extract until the last tenth of an unstable car. His ability to classify the limit and manage degradation surgically makes it an invaluable asset. What has missed him, historically, is the consistency of the car. With a more balanced SF25, Leclerc can become the sniper of the championship. And with the support of a rear suspension that allows you to push and curve outputs without compromising the flat background, it could recover the confidence that has been losing after each strategic or technical disappointment. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, is another type of beast. His beginning of the season was difficult. The adaptation to the new environment, to a radically different car that led for more than a decade, and an organizational culture with different times, exposed it as never before. But Mugello has changed it. Hamilton has been an active part of the development of this suspension. He has worked side by side with engineers. He has asked for specific simulations. He has adjusted his braking style to adapt the car to his needs. What is building is not just performance. It is belonging. If the SF25 evolves as expected, Ferrari will not only have a top pilot. He will have a convinced leader, hungry, and with the exact experience to turn that car into a precision weapon. In addition, there is an invisible but crucial factor: the moral of the team. Ferrari has historically been an extreme team. When things go wrong, chaos can seize Maranello. But when a technical solution like this works, the collective impulse is extraordinary. From the Department of Simulations to the box's team, everyone is aligned under a common idea: that victory is possible. And that belief is more powerful than any simulation. What Ferrari has done in Mugello is not simply a technical improvement. It is a declaration of principles. At a time when everything seemed to be collapsing, they chose to reinvent themselves from engineering, rebuild their aerodynamic concept from the rear axle, and, most importantly, bet on a solution that challenged their own original design. Mugello has been more than a test circuit. It has been the scenario of a break with the recent past. And that breakup, if confirmed in the next races, can change everything. But this is only the beginning. The real exam for Ferrari begins now. Because if this new suspension proves to be effective in scenarios as different as Suzuka, Sakir, or Jeddah, we will be facing one of the fastest and most radical transformations that we have seen in the hybrid era. And if not, it will be remembered as one more promise that stayed on the road. I'm interested in knowing how you see this moment. Do you think Ferrari has found the correct key, or do you think there is still a lot to compete from you with McLaren and Red Bull? Does this suspension represent a real turning point, or will it be a passing improvement in the middle of an unpredictable season? Share your opinion in the comments.